Hello and welcome, I'm Maria from Sew Through Time, and this week we're talking about Regency fashion. Like so many others, I've been hit by the Bridgerton bug, and that really got me excited about Regency again. So I thought I'd make this short video explaining a little bit about the Regency silhouette and how it changes over time, just as a reference so that I don't have to explain every single time, and then I can link back to this when we get to the actual making of things. Now, when we talk about Regency period as in Regency fashion, we don't talk about just the Regency era in the English kingdom. We actually talk usually about from about 1795 to about 1820. And the reason for this definition is because this is the era when you have that high empire waist that comes up to underneath your bust. And that is, all of this fashion is kind of influenced by that Greek, Roman ideal of naturalism and flowy kind of beautiful gowns and the natural woman's form. Of course, the form isn't actually natural. It never is. But that's the ideal. Looking at the first half of that, or first bit of this, what we usually refer to as early Regency, that is the 1790s bit. The fashion has changed from the 18th century fashion to a more forward thrust bust, and the gowns themselves have become more flowy, and especially with the chemise de la reine, there is already that gathering in the bust area, but the bust doesn't actually have definition yet in the stays. So as we go through the 90s, that slowly the chemise dress changes from having drawstrings up until the waist, and it becomes a round gown with just that gathering underneath the bust. And the whole 1790s can really be defined by that really soft, voluptuous, sensual look. These big skirts, in comparison, make your arms look smaller, and sleeves in this era tend to be really form-fitting and tight, either long or shorter, but if they are short, they tend to be close to your elbow length. Stays in this era are still reminiscent of the 18th century stays. They still don't have a lot of cup definition. There are some styles coming up where there is an actual cup, and then it ends up kind of looking like a long line bra stays weird mixture thing. But a lot of the stays don't actually have cup definition yet. The emphasis is just on getting your bust thrust forward as far out as it can go. And you add to that illusion by putting the drapey fabric on top, a kerchief, to just add oomph to your bust. Silk taffetas are still used, like in the 18th century, but a lot of the fabrics that are really ideal for these gowns and what are most fashionable are really, really light muslins and really, really light flowy and even see-through fabrics. As we get into the early 1800s, the silhouette changes a little bit. Instead of having that big, voluptuous look, the emphasis on the bust grows, and the bust starts to have separation, as in cups, and also it starts to have the underbust definition too, where there's a strict point where your bust starts from. And because of these changes, also your skirts become more narrow, and the volume from the front goes away. There can be very little gathering or absolutely no gathering, and all the gathering in the skirts are in the back. The back still stays flowy and kind of bigger, and it hides your natural form. It doesn't curve with your body. Now, with this change in the emphasis of your bust, what really becomes fashionable is a shelf bust. So you lift it as high as possible, and then you just keep it there hanging. On a small bust, you can get some roundedness on top, but on a larger bust, it's really just girls as high as they go, and there isn't much roundness on top. And other than that, bust definition and separation and lift that the stays provide, there's a huge wooden busk, usually at least 1.5 inches wide, between your breasts to keep them separated and give that really big bust definition. Other than that, the stays don't actually do much. They're just meant to smooth down your silhouette and keep your front straight. That's also why, especially larger ladies, a longer form of stays, because you really want that smooth, flat front. In the 1790s, most gowns tend to have trains. And in the early 1800s, it kind of shifts. It depends on whether you're following English fashion or French fashion. That do you have a train in the daytime? Always in evening wear, you still have a train. But the big difference is that now there's a definite difference between an evening gown and a ball gown. A ball gown does not usually have a train, but an evening gown or full dress gown, what would be worn for dinner or to other social events that happens in the evening other than a ball, you would have a train. Sleeves also go through a change. In the 1790s, sleeves are almost always tight, and long sleeves tend to be to your wrist, and short sleeves are to about your elbow. Then as we get through to the early 1800s, sleeves can go kind of all over the place. There can be really short sleeves, there can be longer short sleeves, and then there can still be those wrist length sleeves, but long sleeves, the fashion tends to go towards super ultra long sleeves, where it actually goes well past your wrist and even up to your fingers. And there's just a gathering string around your wrist. In that first decade of the 1800s, the emphasis from that kind of really tight sleeve goes to a fuller sleeve, where we start seeing puffs actually happening in short sleeves. And then a lot of times you would have the same gown have a long sleeve option where it's a detachable long sleeve. As we get into the 18 teens, sleeves become looser, wider, and they tend to have more gathering. They become more reminiscent of the 17th century fashion. This emphasis on both more like 17th century fashion and also Renaissance style fashion becomes more obvious in many ways and affects the gowns. Not only are the sleeves fuller and they have a lot of gathering on them, and you also get ruffs. And as this happens, hems also get shorter. And during the daytime, your hems get so short that your ankles become visible. And because those hems are getting shorter, they're not anymore so long that you don't need anything there. It becomes obvious that you need something there, some sort of detail, something. So pin tucks and embroidered scalloped hems become really fashionable. As the 18 teens progress, the hems become slightly wider and they become more elaborate in their decorations. You start seeing cording, padding, and different sort of things like this to create a 3D effect on the hem, and also to keep the hem as it widens even further away from your legs. And this slowly starts to remind us of the Romantic era. And slowly as this fashion progresses, sleeves get bigger and the puffs get bigger and bigger and bigger, and slowly the waistline starts dropping a little bit. At first it's not very noticeable, but then it starts getting closer and closer to your actual waist until about the 25, when it reaches your actual natural waist. And it becomes clear that it's already the Romantic era fashion reminiscent of the 1830s. So I hope that gave you a general understanding of the Regency era fashion, and maybe, even if you do know a lot about it already, gave you a little bit more of a clear idea as how the silhouette changes throughout the era. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. And in the comments below, please let me know what time period in the Regency fashion is your favorite. Is it that early, voluptuous 1790s look? Or maybe that 1800s kind of strict boobs up, very soft silhouette? Or is it maybe that later reminiscent of already the Romantic era with the soft ruffles and puffs and gathers and all that detail. See you next time. Bye.